Okay, good morning, everybody. Welcome to Norwich Council Licensing Meeting on 5th of August. We have one main item on the agenda today, which is Pure Gold on Fitzroy Road. First of all, we'll take apologies, please.
None received, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Declarations of interest? No?
Sorry, there was an apology from Mr. Vladi, who's the applicant.
Yeah, okay, so thank you. Declarations of interest? No. What there is, I'll introduce myself and move on to item 3, which is calculation of various premises license to be Road. My name is Ian Shooby, I'm the chair today. I've got Councillor Sam Button to my left, Councillor Adam Giles to my right, David Holmes, who's our legal advisor from the law, Maxine Fuller, and we also got Chris, committee officer. Thank you. We have an objector, Councillor Gray, as well. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll pass over to Maxine, who will introduce the report, and then we'll talk to you, Mr. Hedge.
Thank you.
Members are asked, in accordance with the delegation of licensing functions contained in the Norwich City Council Statement of Licensing Policy, Licensing Act 2003, to consider the application for the variation of a premises licence in respect of Pure Gold, 52 Prince of Wales Road, Norwich NR1 1LL, following the receipt of relevant representations. Recommended that members determine the application to vary the premises licence in accordance with the Licensing Act 2003, guidance issued under section 182 of the Licensing Act 2003, and Norwich City Council Statement of Licensing Policy, including the cumulative impact policy. The applicant is Pure Gold Limited. In summary, the application seeks to extend opening hours and regulated entertainment from 0400 hours to 0600 hours. A copy of the existing licence and operating schedule is attached to Appendix A to the report. A copy of the application form is attached to Appendix B to the report. There was no objections from any of the responsible authorities. Representations objecting to the application have been received from 6 local residents and 2 councillors. Copies of the representations are attached to Appendix C to the report. Attached to Appendix D is a noise monitoring plan which was submitted by the agent. Attached to Appendix E is a location map. Attached to Appendix F are the elements of the City Council's local licensing policy, which are considered to have a bearing upon the application, including the cumulative impact policy at paragraph 29. Attached to Appendix G are the elements of the national guidance issued by the Secretary of State that are considered to have a bearing upon the application. In determining the application with a view to promoting the licensing objectives, the subcommittee must give appropriate weight to the steps that are appropriate to promote the licensing objectives, that's to say the prevention of crime and disorder, public safety, the prevention of public nuisance and the protection of children from harm. The representations, including supporting information presented by all the parties, the guidance issued under section 182 of the Licensing Act 2003, national guidance, and the Council's own statement of licensing policy, including the cumulative impact policy. The subcommittee must take such the following steps that it considers appropriate for the promotion of the licensing objectives. Grant the application as asked. Modify the conditions of the licence by altering or omitting or adding to them. Reject the whole or part of the application. The subcommittee is asked to note that it may not modify the conditions or reject the whole or part of the application merely because it considers it desirable to do so. It must actually be appropriate in order to promote the licensing objectives. The representations received appear to relate to issues that fall under the licensing objectives. The subcommittee is directed to paragraphs 20 and 24 of the local licensing policy at Appendix F which contain examples of factors that impact on the licensing objectives that the applicant could consider when addressing these issues. These paragraphs also contain examples of control measures that may be taken into account in operating schedules having regard to the type of premises or the licensable activities. The subcommittee is also reminded of the contents of appendices 2, 3, 4 and 5 of the local licensing policy, not reproduced in this report, which contain pools of model conditions relating to the 4 licensing objectives. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. Before we move on to Mr. Edge and the applicant, I'd just like to note for the minutes that the committee has decided to disregard the objection on page 48 and also on page 45 as they are not objections. Also, I have a question for David that is relating to impact policy.
Thank you, Chair. Just to cover the 2 matters, we've said not relevant objections, by which I believe the committee means they have not satisfied the statutory test as relevant representations.
I think that's correct.
As to cumulative impact, I would strongly recommend the committee gives little, if any, weight to the cumulative impact policy. This is because the crime data on which that policy was made is many years old now. There have been street scene changes, such as the change in the use of nursing outlook, and the advertised new local policy, which I believe has been considered and approved by your committee and just awaits confirmation by full council, does not contain a cumulative impact policy for this area or any other. With all of those reasons, therefore, Chair, I recommend little if any weight to some cumulative impact policy under the existing, very shortly to be replaced local policy.
Thank you very much for that. Mr. Edge, I'd like to introduce yourself in relationship to the applicant and present your case, please.
I will, thank you very much, Chair. Sorry, could you just tell me, I missed the second one. You said the representations that were now not counting were 48 and
45, I think we're in the wrong page, or 45 and 48.
thank you. Thank you, Chair. My name is Rob Edge.
Can you use your
Sorry, yeah.
please? Yeah, just press the thing back in the middle. Thank you.
My name is Rob Edge. I'm a licensing consultant acting on behalf of Mr. Blarney, the owner and the applicant for this variation. And it was to say as well that Mr. Blarney does send his apologies, but he had a relative that fairly ill and he's had to fly abroad quite urgently 2 days ago. Acting for the applicant, I've given full regard to the representations made against this application. The licensing objectives as set out in the Licensing Act 2003, the Council's Statement of Licensing Policy and the Cumulative Impact Policy, as well as the guidance issued under the Section 182 of the Act. This premises has operated since 2014 and has not come onto the radar of any of the responsible authorities. This is because it's been well run and always shown due diligence in all that it does to uphold the licensing objectives. A premises license is in place and there is a strong management team within the premises who always liaise with responsible authorities and are fully accepting of any advice given by them. I had intended to say that under the cumulative impact policy, that's paragraph 29.6, which is page 64 of the pack, does say that it would apply if there were 4 sale of alcohol, supply of alcohol, or late night refreshment between 2100 and 0600.
Okay, I think the purpose of this hearing, we ignore the community impact.
Okay.
Policy. Thank you.
It's the licence holder's intention to provide sufficient SIA coverage during these additional hours. And we have additionally agreed a last entry time of 03:45 with police licensing. During the conversations with Michelle Bartram, the licensing officer from Norfolk Constabulary, we confirmed that there is no intention to serve alcohol during these additional hours and that the application was purely for regulated entertainment. It was on that basis in the conversation with police that they confirmed they had no concerns with this application or its effect on the CIP. One of the key reasons for not adding alcohol was to reduce the risk of causing any public nuisance. Of the 8 responsible authorities, none submitted objections and therefore have no concerns with the application in its current form. Acting on behalf of the applicant, I've contacted those who have objected and attempted to explain our case to them. It was noted that at least 2 of the objectors had referred to extending drinking hours, which is not the case for the application. And I've attempted to clarify this point in my letter to them. I understand their concerns, but would wish to make it clear that this premises will not give them cause for concern. And should there be any issues or concerns by residents, there is always the route that they may apply for the licence to be reviewed, although I don't believe this will ever be necessary. The premises currently have a very robust operating schedule for its premises licence, with at least 60 plus conditions on the licence. These are bolstered with the additional conditions listed in Annex B to my documents lodged, which were those agreed with the police. Additionally, after conversations with both environmental health and the police, we are using the following to support the application. The noise management plan, as referred to by the licensing manager. The fact that a personal licence holder will be present during the additional hours. That SIA door staff will remain until all patrons have left the premises, supervising those leaving to ensure they do not disturb residents. A last entry time and no re-entry after 03:45. Additionally, in place at the premises are a refusals log, an incident log, challenge 25 policy, staff training and staff training registers. A COVID risk assessment is still in place and is constantly reviewed. Should the new hours be granted, this additional 2-hour period will be carefully monitored by the applicant to ensure that everything works properly, including the use of the noise management plan. That is a generic document that will change as time goes on and as it's being used. Essentially to ensure that that works correctly. That concludes my case for the support of the application, unless there are any questions, Chair.
Yes, I'm sure there will be some questions. I have a couple to start with. And we'll just go through your application. First of all, just to clarify, on page 27, section E, live music. Our interpretation of the page here is that you intend not to have live music.
That's correct, Chair.
Thank you. And also, there's a slight discrepancy in the hours that you presented on page 21 said that no re-entry to premises after 3:45, and you just stated that in the presentation. And later in the document on page 33, it says 4 o'clock there. Do you want to just confirm the time?
I hold my hand up, Chair. That's a complete error on my part. It is 03:45.
Okay, so page 33 should read 03:45 instead of 4.
It should indeed. My apologies, Chair.
Okay, thank you. And the question about the designated smoking area, can you describe where that is, please?
It's to the front of the premises, to the right of the main entrance. And generally, it's a small roped off area monitored by the SIA staff. They generally don't allow, well, there are 2 things they don't allow. One is no one is allowed to take any form of drink or vessel with drink outside. And they monitor the number of people, ideally keeping it to 4 or less at any one time.
Okay, and those that are out there, they're not allowed to take it, and is that at all times?
At all times, Chair.
Okay, any questions from the councillors? Councillor Butler, please.
Can I just ask what your current capacity is, please? And what that will be after all restrictions are lifted? Inside the club?
You've stumped me without looking at the licence to see if it was in there, because I know that the fire risk assessment was renewed very recently. But I haven't included it within the paper, so I have to hold my hand up and say that I don't know the number, unless I look through and see if it was listed within the conditions.
Okay, thank you. Maxine, do you have that information?
No, we don't really get.
The license will have a maximum attached to it. Yes, the number is less than a day.
If I can, Chair. Just to confirm what Max has said, the question of numbers will be a matter for the fire service and their policy and inspection, rather than something that the licensing team will be controlling.
Okay. So in that case, while we don't have the information, is not necessarily relevant to
That's it, Chair.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions? Councillor Grass? Sorry, would you mind just turning your mic off while
Sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Just with regards to that last point, with regards to the capacity, would that be relevant to our determination if it had an impact on that noise impacting from the premises, David?
I'm on green rather than red, but hopefully everybody can hear me. I think it is obviously relevant to your determination as to noise, and that determination will be valid regardless of number. But it's a matter that needs proving, obviously, rather than being speculative.
Yeah.
But if noise from 450 persons is you find a nuisance, then that's fine. It doesn't have to be 500, 600 persons.
And the question I was going to ask the agent is with regards to page 33 and page 35 as a proposed amendment to the conditions relating to door supervisors. So the wording says door supervisors will be employed during the late evening and early hours of the following morning, proportionate to the risk. It then goes on after the comment to say, and will remain until all customers have vacated the premises. And you said in your oral submission that all door supervisors will remain until all customers have vacated the premises. So there's a lack of clarity there. Would you please fill it up for us?
Yes, certainly, Councillor. There will always be SIA staff on duty, and they will remain until such time as the last customer has left and vacated the premises. The number of SIA will be based on a risk assessment, and in conversations with Michelle Barton from the police, initially we talked about whether that specific number should be a specific number for certain days or for certain hours. But her take on it in the end was that because there was no addition of alcohol to the licence and only an addition of regulated entertainment, then a risk assessment would be sufficient rather than specifying a number in a condition.
Chair, with your permission, it might be useful to look at page 13, where there is a current condition relating to employment of door supervisors, and that's condition 12. There's been no application I'm aware of to amend that condition.
Thank you, David. So just for the benefit of anyone watching the papers, page 13, item 12, states there should be a minimum of one SIA registered door supervisor present at any time when the premises are open to public and for performance of exotic dancing. In addition, a minimum of 2 SIA door supervisors shall be on duty every Friday and Saturday nights, and any nights where it's like music, dance, or disco event between the hours of and terminal hours stated on the licence. So therefore, item 12 is relevant to this application. Okay. So just clarity then, one SIO registered door supervisor will be present at all times, and 2 on Fridays and Saturdays until 6 o'clock in the morning.
Yes,
Okay.
and from 2100 hours, I think it was.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, any further questions? We have some objected. Oh, sorry, Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chair. I was disappointed on page 35 under the table only for licensing objectives. There was nothing written under public safety, prevention, traffic nuisance, or protection of children from harm. Could you please set out further how these licensing objectives will be met?
Certainly, Councillor. Under those, as I said earlier, in conversations with environmental health and with the police, it was asked whether they considered any additional conditions should be added in addition to those that are currently on the licence. And in both cases, having talked quite extensively through the 60+ conditions, there was nothing else that either they or I considered could be added additionally that would make the licence any more robust than it is. I mean, actually, the number of conditions and also the robust way in which the original conditions were written for this licence means that that it is a very strong operating schedule, and it would be not impossible, but it would be very difficult to bolster those any stronger than they currently are. I hope that.
With safety, clearly at 4 o'clock in the morning, people at that time they work in other establishments in the area, and could well be extremely drug that stage. So therefore, there might be a public safety outcome disorder to part of this license, where further controls may be needed, especially for protection of dancers. Can you give us a bit more detail on how that would be controlled, please?
Certainly, Chair. As would be normal for the SIA door staff, and the owner himself is also SIA badged. Anyone who is considered to be drunk would not be permitted into the premises, and the fact that there is no alcohol from the hour of 4 o'clock onwards. And there are additional measures in there, such as the dancers when they leave, and that may not be that all the dancers leave at the end of the evening. On occasion, some dancers leave slightly early. They're escorted from the door to a taxi immediately outside of the premises. And the risk assessment covers all the elements of who does what, when, and how, and that the SIA doorman who would normally supervise the main door can call upon the second SIA doorman, or can call upon Mr. Palladin, as I've said, who is also badged, to give additional support.
Okay, thank you. We have talked about the risk assessment again in a bit, so we have an objector here, and that's Councillor Gray. I'd like to invite Councillor to this.
Thank you. Am I allowed to ask questions?
You may, yes.
Oh, excellent. Okay, I have some questions of my own and some testimony from residents that I'm going to represent. So my
Sorry, Chair, I'm not aware of the council being informed by a person who's made a relevant representation that Councillor Graham was acting on their behalf. Does I stand to be corrected?
Yeah, no, I think she just sent an email saying she was going to represent the residents. We can say what residents. Is that what you mean?
No, it was a technical question to see whether anybody who's made a relevant representation had said
Oh, I see.
they would be represented by Councillor Graham.
Oh,
No.
they have. Yeah. I have emails from people who send representations and some haven't.
David, is your question here suggesting that Councillor Graham's input will be should be disregarded if they're not from relevant objectives?
Chair, I think for fairness, that is the appropriate procedure. We're not here to disadvantage anyone. And even if a person making a relevant representation has not followed the correct format, then if they want Councillor Graham to represent them, I see no harshness or disadvantage to the applicant. However, if a person has not made a relevant representation, they are not entitled to have their views heard at this committee, whether directly or via this route. Because if you haven't made a relevant representation in the correct time, your views cannot be considered. And it would be unfair and an ambush of the applicant. It may be from a practical point of view, there is no problem. I just flag the risk of prejudice and the need to be very careful.
Okay, so if we ask Councillor Graham to stick to the points made to clarify those who have made relevant
And her own, of course.
Objection. So if you disregard anything hasn't made one of these relevant objections to it. Thank you.
Can I start with my own questions then? Which I can phrase as statements if you prefer. So on panel on page 23, there will be a breathalyzer on the premises if licensing officers supplied. but if it's needed, why isn't it there all the time? Another question is code of conduct for customers. I'm just wondering how customers are made aware of this. Under public safety, I didn't see any mention of COVID. And also a number of incidents are logged, and I didn't see anything that said what happens to that information afterwards. Nuisance, empty bottles, it's good to see a time limit, but if we've been kept away till 6 o'clock, then 8 o'clock is well too early to be woken up by bottles going into the skip. But the thing that alarms me, probably, what I most want to ask is, if alcohol sales stop at 4, surely, if I want to drink till 6 o'clock in the morning, I'm going to get a couple of rounds in at 3:30 and carry on drinking till 6 o'clock in the morning. Otherwise, why would you want to stay open if people can't buy drink? But really, should I let you answer some of those and then read the testimony, or should I just carry on to?
Well, yes, let's pause there, and I'll ask Mr. Edge to address those, and I assume that you know, so hopefully you can then address all of those.
Certainly. If I've missed some, then please just give me a job.
Just use your microphone, please.
Sorry, is that now? Yeah. With regards to the COVID risk assessment, I think we're all aware the policies and regulations over COVID have changed so much during the 18-month period. The COVID risk assessment has been amended on a few occasions and is still in place at the moment and is constantly under review. There was no mention of it because essentially most local authorities from an environmental health point of view don't necessarily want to put COVID on as a condition unless it's phrased in such a way that that it kind of has an expiry date. So that would be the reason for not having included it in there, and that was a conversation with environmental health. Logging incidents. An incident log is actually dealt with in the same manner as a refusals log under challenge 25. So those are kept at the premises. Again, I'd have to look through the 50, 60, but generally they're kept for a period of a minimum of 12 months, and they're made available to any responsible authority or any other police officer on request, and they're kept at the premises and available. Was that your question on the incident logs?
Too many people got the microphones on for me to be able to use them. Oh, sorry, stop the question. Yes, but more about how, you know, if an event happens, I thought the log is there to help you identify the cause and stop it from happening again, and I haven't heard that. And my most important question was, does stopping alcohol sales at 4 o'clock mean stopping drinking at 4 o'clock?
Yeah. Mine's flashing with somebody else.
That's me, sorry.
Okay. So, sorry, I was going to come to those other points. I just wanted to explain the incident log bit. With regards to stockpiling of drink, people would not be allowed to. Mr. Blarney was quite specific in that he did not want alcohol sales after 4 o'clock. It was requests from many customers that they wish to remain on the premises and continue to be entertained by the dancers, and that alcohol sales would be someone buying their drinks, and they'll be reminded that, 30 minutes before, drinks stop at 3:45 as per the license, and it would be strictly controlled that people wouldn't be able to buy multiple drinks to sit so that they could carry on drinking during that period. With regards to the rubbish and the hours that were restricted for removing rubbish from the premises, again, that was something the environmental health didn't see fit to change the hours, because it wasn't until 8 o'clock anyway. And all other businesses would be open and operating by 8 o'clock in the morning anyway. I think the next one was about the code of conduct. Well, the code of conduct actually refers to the SEV license and not to the premises license, and that's displayed within the premises and made available to customers on request, in addition to those that are displayed.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Graham, do you have any more questions or any statements for us?
Yes,
We talked about earlier.
it's good to hear that stockpiling is not allowed. It would be nice to see it in writing and to know how that's enforced. But I'm here to represent residents. So Alex, who lives above Pure Gold, said, I live in the heart of Prince of Wales Road.
Chair, I'm not sure Alex above these premises has made a relevant representation.
Councillor Graham,
That's a question for the licensing team. If he has, then it should be on the papers.
can you make a representation?
I don't have the agenda in front of me. I will tell us that.
Representation. We don't have a relevant representation from this particular resident, so therefore.
Yesterday. Please.
Councillor Graham's searching for that representation. Put the question for you to correct to one of the questions Councillor Graham asked. That is about the buying of drinks just before the closing bar. Presumably, customers could buy a large bottle of something, wine or another type of champagne or something at that time, and just have one glass with it.
I think mine
That's
has.
great. Just send them up, please.
Sorry.
I think, after the discussion now, I think it's more than relevant that this is something that probably wasn't given enough consideration, either by myself or the police in that conversation. And obviously you'll take legal advice, but I'd be quite happy to volunteer a condition onto the license, something to the effect of, and I don't know whether it's too much of an anecdotal phrase, but that says the stockpiling of drinks between, I don't know whether you say 0330 to 400 will not be permitted. I suppose it's slightly difficult in the wording, in as much as if somebody did order, for example, a bottle of wine at 3:20, whether you then say to them, you can't do that,
Okay, would you like to think about a word, if you'd like to offer that as a condition, if you'd like to think about a word?
Certainly, Chair.
During the year, and come back to this.
Yeah, I think, I mean, you know, I admit, I think it will just bottom that one out, and prevent anyone trying to circumvent the fact there is not a condition to cover it.
Okay, so, yeah, if you think about the condition word, the specifics of our definition. David.
Chair, I think 0400 was mentioned, that's wrong, of course, it should be 0345, as that's, I think, the hour for the close of sale.
It is at the present,
So
yes.
you're looking at 0330 to 0345, perhaps. And just to confirm, consumption isn't licensable activity. But if it is something that is causing you concern, and if it is something that the applicant is happy to deal with by way of offered condition, then that, of course, will be fine. So the only thing I'd suggest is try and tighten up on stockpiling, and it's going to be 0330 to 045, perhaps.
Yeah, no, I agree as well that you know, supply isn't the issue, but
Thank you. Yeah, the objections that we've received about relating to consumption of alcohol, probably the thinking behind those objections are not necessarily purchasing alcohol, but consuming alcohol till 6 o'clock in the morning. And that's partially being addressed by the condition withdrawal request for the extension of the alcohol. And so if you could address that condition, that could be helpful to the committee.
certainly.
Councillor Gray, do you have any further statements or representations relevant to those who have presented in the pack?
I have, but the person asked not to be named, although they have objected. So I'm going to say it on my own behalf as representing residents. So,
Chair, sorry, but we don't have any anonymous representations in the back. If it's anonymous, it can't be in the back.
Yes, unfortunately, Councillor Brown, you will have to reference one of the objectives. If you give us
So
the
can I
page,
tell-
if you give us the page number, that will be sufficient for our benefit. Please do know that these packs are published and available for everybody to read.
So can I just give it to David in confidence, or to the chair in confidence?
Well,
No, Chair, this is a public meeting.
In the public meeting, and the objections that have been raised by the public are public, they've been published. And if you're making a representation from them, you should stick to the points they've made in their representation. That's therefore there could be no.
So can I make it for me?
Chair, more advice from me. The councillor is making it clear and has done that this isn't her representation, and thus it is hazarding this committee, because she has indicated she is using a technical method to get around the hearing regulations. I'd strongly recommend any comment is just from the councillor, and the best way, obviously, of ensuring that is to concentrate on those matters set out in her written representation.
Yes, absolutely. Councillor Brown, you submitted a relevant objection to this application, so it's time to speak on matters that you raised in that objection. So if you'd like to, please do.
I'm finding minutes. So the noise levels before lockdown were phenomenal, even with all windows shut and bass booming music. The bass booming music reverberated through the entire houses, making sleep very difficult for several nights each week. This has a knock-on effect of adverse health caused by sleep deprivation, and by Monday morning, residents were exhausted, and it affected their work and living and quality of life. The noise is not limited to the clubs, as patrons transit between entertainment venues or leave them for the night, using some faith lanes around them. Residents are further disturbed by groups of drunken revellers shouting, fighting, and generally behaving in an antisocial manner. As an example, within the space of 1 month, one resident told me she had to call the police on the road at least 5 times. Litter and vermin. More people means more rats, basically. Also more vandalism. Public urination. Nightclub patrons regularly urinate against the walls.
Chair, I am sorry, but rats are not on page 39. Public urination isn't on page 39. The councillor is clearly reading from data that is not in her representation.
Yes, Councillor, stick to the points you made in your representation.
The main thing is residents get little enough sleep anyway, and reducing, the extra noise and hassle between 4 and 6 makes all the difference between being the kind of noise you expect when you live in the city centre to being a public nuisance.
Okay, thank you. I'll ask Mr. H to respond to that shortly. So just so that we are clear, your statement made references to families in the local area, disturbance to them and children. That's in your representation. Your representation also about you've asked in there for it to be restricted to weekends. Do you stand by that as a potential solution?
I certainly do. We may not be recognising cumulative impacts of alcohol sales, but I think we will recognise cumulative impacts of sleep deprivation. I mean, losing those 2 hours every night, day on day, is going to have a huge impact on you. So that's why I would ask for the hours to stay as they are, and if they must be increased for it to only be at weekends.
Okay, and also in your representation, you talked about the noise and potential for mental crowds to turn away if they are driving. Mr. Edge has described how that process will work. So again, I'd like Mr. Edge to respond to that point specifically in a moment. I think the final part of your objection is partially covered by the answers, or the answers that we received, which we changed in the rest of the answers and also included on before. So can you respond to the noise, especially if the building's close to you, and also the potential for arguments and shouting? But those that may take away.
Certainly, Chair, thank you. I think firstly, it's worth pointing, and I don't like repeating myself, but neither the police or environmental health, who are the council's 2 experts on noise, crime and disorder and antisocial behaviour, saw anything in there that gave them cause for alarm or cause to believe that this would add a problem to whatever currently goes on within the area. And I point that the SIA staff that are employed by the club are very closely supervised by Mr. Blarding. He probably spends far more time at the club supervising and monitoring the day-to-day business through to the early hours of the morning, and would ensure that, as is recommended by the police, that there's a firm stance taken by door staff who refuse entry to people, and that they're dealt with in a firm but fair way, so that there isn't a, for the want of a better word, a fracas at the door or shouting or any unnecessary problems there. It's very well disciplined and very well controlled. And I don't really know what else I can say to that, you know, it was quite specific that the application to vary was not to include alcohol, because I think had the application come in, firstly, the police would be sitting here saying they had an issue over alcohol being served between the 4 and 6 o'clock. And the measures that would have needed to be in place would have been much more robust, and even then might not have been enough. The other thing to say is, and this is quite common, as committee members will know, that an application is a long and costly process, and a premises may apply as in this case, 7 days a week, but it's quite conceivable that they would only use that for 3 days a week, but to have the ability to use it at specific times of the year, like during the festive period maybe. But it's unlikely, and Mr. Blarney said to me as well at the time, that he was unlikely to utilise the 4 till 6 every day of the week. Particularly as even since COVID restrictions lifted on the 19th of July, many businesses are still struggling, and lots of people still aren't going out to these venues in the way that they did prior to COVID. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. You mentioned a few times the authorities had submitted representations on the following issues, and that's noted by the committee. But we do have some relevant objections from people who are talking about this, and the committee is interested in the lived experiences of local residents who have told us that there is noise specifically from also generally, yeah, so we'll have to weight that accordingly. And one of our objectors says that they have disturbed sleep every night, and this is until 4 o'clock in the morning, current situation. So that's on page 41, and on page 53, again, health and well-being of residents, and the experiences of proposals along the approach, do not really require them. There's another one for Ron. 46, talks about rounding behaviour. So there is an issue, and it's not necessarily from your club, although there is some reference to noise directly from the club. Can you address that for us, please, and describe how open until 6 o'clock will make it less of an experience of people?
Certainly, Chair. I spoke with a licensing consultant who actually deals with the other 2 clubs on Prince of Wales Road, and he previously used to represent Mr. Blarney. He's cut down the amount of work, which is why he's not representing all three. They have similar hours until 6 o'clock, but don't fully utilise them. And one of the questions I asked of environmental health, because I thought it would come up from one of the councillors, was, is there a log of complaints of noise, nuisance or antisocial behaviour from Pure Gold, registered to Pure Gold by residents? And the answer was no. Now, the reason I asked for the question was it would help me to be better prepared to answer questions when I came here. It would seem as though, and I fully understand what the residents are saying, that this is a noise problem within the area, within the city centre, that doesn't seem to, apart from any incident that would have been logged with the police, for instance, is not attributed directly to my client's premises. Because I know that if you had, for instance, formal logged complaints against the premises and the dates and times, I'd be sitting here with a pair of handcuffs on saying, I have no answer for you. That wasn't the case, but the applicant is also aware that he's invested lots of time and money and refurbished the building. He lives locally and wants to live and work beside the residents. He doesn't want to alienate residents and doesn't want to end up with a reputation as a premises that causes problems to residents. And that's why he's being very robust about the manner in which not just the day-to-day running of the club is, but for those additional hours as well. And with regards to the music is ambient, background music. It's not the main source of the entertainment, particularly, SEVs isn't about, disco or dancing, dancing by patrons, to loud music or bass. That's the kind of thing that goes on in public houses and nightclubs and not in SEVs. And it's very unusual for an SEV to cause nuisance, not impossible, but very, very unusual for an SEV to cause nuisance through music.
Okay, thank you. I guess the what you were referring to as the general problem in the area, I suppose, cumulative impact. Yes, Councillor Giles, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for your response. On page 41, pages 41 and 43, as councillors do previously referenced, Rich Yao and Frank Felton's objectives do make specific reference to Pure Gold and the experiences they've had with nuisance arising from Pure Gold. At point, with the extension hours, will Mr. Flood been taking any additional measures to reduce the noise coming from the premises between 4 AM and 6 AM? And what are any additional measures being taken to moderate the behaviour of clients leaving the premises at the end of the night?
I take the point that somebody's referenced Pure Gold in here purely because that's their objection to this application. But it's difficult for an owner of any licensed premises to address an issue if it's not reported through the proper channel. So in other words, if a resident had a particular problem with Pure Gold and had reported it to the council, through environmental health. Generally, the environmental health officer or public protection officer would be contacting the premises license holder and saying, you know, even as a first sort of shot across the bow, we've received a noise complaint. Can we meet with you, or can we discuss the current conditions on your license to ensure that we mitigate this problem so that it doesn't reoccur? Whereas, you know, this would be the first, I believe, that Mr. Blarney would have known about someone saying that noise has come specifically from his premises. I'm sorry, there was a second part to your question. About mitigation moving forward. I mean, there are conditions within the license that you know, all doors and windows will remain closed except for access and egress when any regulated entertainment is played. The noise monitoring plan, and with your permission, Chair, if I could just explain it, its basic principle is that it generally works is a member of staff instructed by the license holder would pick out specific, what are referred to as receptor points. So, for instance, a good example would be, you know, sugar and spice, which is opposite on the other side of the road. So a member of staff would walk across to where sugar and spice is, stand there and listen and determine whether they could hear the music from across the road. Now, between the hours of 4 and 6, there is far less traffic on the road, and therefore the noise will be more easily heard. You then generally pick a couple of receptor points which are close to, for the want of a better word, key residential properties, and go to each of those points and determine what level of noise can be heard, if any. And by going out and doing those at a regular basis, it ensures that an individual member of staff can't, just because they feel they want to, for the want of a better phrase, crank the music up. Because when they return, they would go to either the DPS or the applicant, the manager, and say, I've just been out to such and such a point, and I can hear the music from there. And the music will be reduced. And generally, over a period of time, what you end up doing is having, if you think of a volume button on a machine, which is numerated, you would have set levels for set times. So in other words, up until the bewitching hour of 2300, it would be acceptable to have music at 65 decibels. Anything after 11 o'clock, you would then say that that needed to be reduced, and that might be number 5 or number 7 on the dial. So that's something that would be an ongoing process, so that there were set systems in place to ensure that the noise did not disturb neighbours unnecessarily. Sorry if I made that a bit long-winded.
Okay, thank you, no problem. Yeah, I'll just come back to Councillor Jones.
Thank you. Would the applicant be minded to volunteer a maximum amount of decibels to use between 4 AM and 6 AM? Looking at data, this is an issue.
Chair, with your permission, there's already the decibel control. If we look at page 14, you'll see condition 49 specifies decibels maximum. Page 16 deals with the question of amplified music and the council determining permitted maximum sound levels. That's condition 57, condition 56 also relevant.
And 49.
Thank you, David.
Yes, indeed, page 14, condition 49.
Thank you, David. I'll note that. Would you consider a lower level of decibels after 4 AM?
I will say that I'm not qualified within that area of expertise. And as I said, generally the accepted level in clubs, pubs, etc. is 65, whereas environmental health said within the current conditions of the license that it shall not exceed 45 decibels. Now I know, for example, the fan on my oven at home is 62 decibels, only because I was playing with the machine. So I don't know whether reducing below 45, whether people would even be able to hear the music within the building.
Just the last point I made with regards to address in the building between 4 AM and 6 AM, whether we'll be taking any additional steps to mitigate any nuisance arising from that. Also, the use of the designated smoking area between those 2 areas as well, whether you take any additional steps.
I don't know what other steps could be taken for people vacating the premises between those hours. In some respects, it's beneficial if people are leaving scattered, so that, you know, if there were 8 or 10 people in there and 2 or 3 of them left at, you know, between 4 and half 4 and the others left at 5, there's less impact than everyone leaving at the same time. I think we could amend the smoking condition to say that no more than 2 people can utilise the smoking area between 4 and 6 if you felt that would be helpful, because I certainly know myself that, you know, people talking, voices carry quite a long way, particularly, as I said earlier on, you know, when there's no traffic and no other background noise to absorb that.
Thank you. Are you offering that as a condition there?
Was that confirmation, Jeff?
Sorry.
So was that an offered condition at this point?
Yeah.
No more than 2 persons can utilise smoking area between 4 AM to 6 AM. Right, thanks.
Councillor Butler would like to follow up on that, please.
You're saying 2 people, but then 2 people can still be talking. Would that be better just to say between those hours, only 1 person can go out for a cigarette at a time? I know it's a bit boring and lonely, but that then cuts out people together.
I take your point, councillor, but I think if we go back to what we were talking about earlier on, this is, you know, between 4 and 6 in the morning. I'm not saying we're trying to appease people, but you start putting rules and enforcement in of only 1 person and you can't go out, you know, in a pair or whatever. It's probably going to, I mean, you know, if you think that is the right one, then fine. But I think it places SIA in confrontation with individuals by saying, no, not you 2, only 1 at a time. And they said, well, you know, we just want a cigarette. We'll keep our noise down and we'll keep quiet. If people were talking too loud as a couple outside, then that's exactly why the smoking area is immediately adjacent to where the SIA doorman is, so that they monitor that very closely. I take your point. I just think from a point of view of conflict resolution, when you over police something, more often than not, it causes a problem when actually there isn't a problem there.
Just as a small follow-up, what percentage of your patrons would you say are still smokers? I mean, smoking has decreased one whole lot anyway. Would you say there's still a high percentage or not that many?
I would say probably 5%. I hold my head in shame. I'm a smoker, and I know that I'm very much in the minority.
Okay, thank you. That's probably the issue of the smoking area, something for the committee to consider. Councillor Graham, would you like to follow up with any questions or statements or answer to your submission?
Very much. And there haven't been that many complaints relating to specific clubs. And it could be that all the clubs are doing absolutely nothing wrong, but just by being opening for another couple of hours means that everything that happens goes on for another couple of hours. So putting in writing that they won't be open, that they'll be shut at 4 on certain days of the week, say Monday to Thursday, would be very reassuring to residents. If there's something kicking off outside your window, you're not going to complain about a particular club because you don't know where those people are coming from, and you're hardly going to go out and ask them. And just another question that relates to the numbers. I don't need to know the numbers, the capacity of the club, and neither do you, but I would like to think that the security staff know how many people are in the club and how many they're allowed to let in. So I just would like that confirmed.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, the first point, I take the point completely that, when people randomly make noise in the street, very often it's difficult to ascertain which premises they've come from. But I think what we're talking about is, and I understand that people leaving can occasionally be talking too loud, whatever. The SIA staff have specific instructions about, for example, taxis that come to collect patrons are not to play their radios. They're not to have their windows open even if they've got their radio on, and they're not to use the horn as a method of alerting a customer that they're waiting. As I said, I personally don't believe that the music is an issue in relation to noise. And maybe, residents, I mean, certainly I wrote to all the residents and gave them my full contact details, and wouldn't be averse in the future, providing it didn't become a permanent thing. But to residents, contacting me and saying that there was an issue at the club on Friday night, this is what the issue was, and I'll refer it back to the applicant so that it's dealt with, because, as I said, he's very conscientious about the fact that he wants to live and work in the community. He's been there since 2014.
Okay, thank you. Are we therefore offering a condition to be added that there will be a number for residents to contact?
In fairness, no, Chair, because I think that then goes, that would be my mobile number out in the public domain.
Okay, could you offer that on behalf of the applicant? Means to get in contact at those hours, should there be a problem?
Yes, Chair.
Okay, thank you. You make that, please.
Not saying who the telephone number is for, the telephone contact and possibly showing my age, is to be available for local residents, to use during opening hours. Is that everybody's intention?
Let's see again, please.
Thank you, I think that would make a difference. But I echo again, most of the things that our residents complain about are on the street and they can't be traced to a particular club. But if the clubs were, if the industry association had a number that residents could call when they don't know where the regulars have been, I think that would be an even bigger help. I realise that's not part of this application, but maybe something to consider for the future.
Thank you, Councillor. That's noted by the committee.
A lot of what happens out of sight of the SIA security people. It's on the streets where the police don't go. And the residents avoid if they can as well.
Yeah, okay, the individual clubs are responsible for patrons after they've left the immediate location. Okay, so we've talked in some detail about a number of items. Comes Councillor Giles.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, I spoke quite a bit, but conscious there's a lot of public interest in such applications. With regards to the licensing objectives of protecting children from harm, I believe that when you came in spring regarding the renewable license, I highlighted that Salon impacts on the second time 5 years ago, moved to Norwich on the train 2 years and used to walk down Prince of Wales Road Monday to Saturday in the morning, sort of, almost hopscotch over the leaflets that have been distributed the night before. And I know you did offer, although once it's outside your domain, it's not your legal responsibility to play your part in clearing up the litter and such like. With the hours potentially changing to 6 AM, that obviously reduces the amount of time between the club closing and the child's school and primary school, kids go to school and such like. I just wondered what efforts you're going to take into account the variation you're applying for to ensure this is really done.
I think in essence the question is about what measures you can take to clear litter after 6 o'clock. There's a condition I'm just looking for it now in the neighbourhood
Yes.
requires you to clear up in a certain area, a reasonable area around the club.
Yeah.
So therefore, I think as the judge talked about the time period between schools and where it is. There's a school, I believe, a nursery.
Certainly, Chair. Currently on page 14, condition number 44 reads litter and detritus resulting from the business which is dropped outside will be cleared up. I mean, that condition is a little bit open and a little bit bland, I think, isn't it?
Would you like to consider tightening up?
Quite happy to amend that one to read almost the same, but litter resulting from the business which is dropped outside will be cleared up on a regular basis, and particularly between the hours of 4 and 6.
Okay.
And maybe even, sorry for even include the word litter / promotional literature, so that it's quite specific about the point that Councillor Giles makes.
Okay. Would you like to offer a radius to which your staff in other conditions at this time, we have we had volunteers initiatives that said within a reasonable distance from the premises. It's your condition. You can,
Yeah, I
if you're
do just-
offering, you can word it as you wish.
Yeah. I just think, having been a licensing manager myself previously, when you start using words like reasonable, it's a very subjective one, although the onus is on the premises license holder. So I'd be happy to say, within a reasonable distance. I'm trying to think of another phrase that would capture it.
Chair, there isn't a sensible answer. At the moment, it says dropped outside, so implicitly, obviously directly outside and within a reasonable area already. Adding reasonable, we can't enforce it. No definition about what reasonable means.
No.
So either you perhaps stick as you are or say 100 yards. For what it's worth, as this is slightly outside the licensing objectives, I would be very much minded to stay as you are, subject to offers from the applicant.
What we could do, and I'll take your point, is add in the bit about promotional literature and to say.
Chair, at the moment, what I've got is additional to 44 wording as will be cleaned up on a regular basis and particularly within the hours of 4 AM to 6 AM full stop. Litter will include promotional literature.
In order to uphold the public nuisance licensing objective.
I'd lose that last bit because I'm really in trouble with the public nuisance bit of this.
All right, then I'd be happy with that one if Councillor Giles, if that satisfies the point he's made.
Right. We were talking about noise, and you indicated that you have a device to measure decibel levels. Will that device or will that device be used to measure decibel levels when you're operating the sound monitoring?
No, it's a device that I have that I use for festivals and other types of events. It's very unusual for a premises to hold one because you then get into conflict with public protection, environmental health over the manner. I mean, you almost need to be professionally qualified to use noise monitoring devices within what's specified within the Licensing Act.
Okay, thank you. And also we referenced the risk assessment, which wasn't provided in the pack, but owners had that distributed by email, and it's quite comprehensive risk assessment. There's nothing in there about potential for human trafficking, which is a potential issue in the industry. Have you addressed that? Would that be addressed as part of any other part of the risk assessment with no specific reference to it?
Yeah, the human trafficking, I believe, was addressed at the last renewal of the SEV license, where it was discussed about the addition of a welfare policy for the SEVs on renewal.
Okay, so there's a separate risk assessment associated with the SEV license.
Not a risk assessment, but a policy document for welfare at the club, which also covered human trafficking.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions from members? Councillor Graham or David?
No, not a question, Chair, but you invited the applicant to review wording as to the stockpiling of drinks between 0330 and 045. Sorry, 0330, 0345.
Yeah, would you like?
will not be permitted.
Do you have something, or would you like some time to volunteer?
I've-
Commission?
I have scribbled something. I put, the premises licence holder will ensure that between the hours of 03:30 and 03:45, that there will be no stockpiling of alcoholic drinks by any customers. I'm reading and thinking whether that
Doesn't really provide a definition, if that's what you're offering, then that is what the committee will consider.
I think apart from
Does a bottle of wine constitute stockpiling, or is it two? Is a bottle of wine one glass stockpiling, but with two glasses not stockpiling?
yeah, I mean, I take your point. And it becomes very subjective, doesn't it? You see, I think if I were the manager in situ, and I'm not, I would think a bottle of wine for one to be acceptable. But I think somebody attempting to buy a bottle of spirits or, you know, stockpiling by asking for, I don't know, 3 double whiskies or something, that would be unacceptable. But I think for somebody who was going to sit there for a period of 2 hours with a bottle of wine, I mean, it's 5 glasses of wine. That's no different to drinking a bottle of wine, you know, during a meal in a restaurant over a 2-hour period. It's a difficult one, Chair.
Yes, I wouldn't disagree with that. We were talking earlier about some of the objections about people drinking for that particular period of time. One of the reasons why you say that your application strengthened this because you removed that, and then you just talked about the possibility of people drinking for those 2 hours.
What about no stockpiling alcohol? Stockpiling, and because I've used the word alcoholic drinks, to say that no more than 1 drink per person during these timings.
Okay, and these are your conditions, so I'm not necessarily.
I know, but and I appreciate that, Chair, but
you could consider units. While you do that, I'll just check with councils for further follow-ups. While you think about that, I'll also invite you to address the committee for a final time before we can final determination. Councillor Graham, have you finished? Okay, thank you. Would you like to pause for 5 minutes? We've been in committee for an hour and a half. Maybe we'll have a short comfort break, and then we'll come back and have the final address of the applicant before those deliberations.
How long the break?
We'll return at 12 o'clock.
So we just wait for. Put the thing back on. Okay, back on. Well, the host has stopped the video, so I hope she'll do it. That's fine. Leonie, they're ready to start?
Ready to go? Thank you. Welcome back to licensing subcommittee, Norwich Council, dated Thursday, 5th August 2021. We're considering an application of various premises licenses for pure goals on works. So we're back to a short break and we're waiting for Edge, the agent consider these last addressed in committee and also voluntary.
Thank you, Chair. The applicant intends to continue to run the premises in a professional manner, always showing due diligence. Of the 8 responsible authorities, none saw fit to object to this application, in particular the police or environment health, leading us to believe this will not add any cumulative impact on the nighttime economy, notwithstanding the resident objections. Mr. Vladi has invested time, money and passion to make this successful. He would not risk any of this by undermining the licensing objectives. The premises have been operated by Mr. Vladi since 2014 as the owner and has never had any issues or problems in relation to crime and disorder or public nuisance. This has been well demonstrated by his willingness to employ the services of a consultant to deliver comprehensive packages of support to upholding the licensing objectives, including noise management plan, risk assessment, staff training, and various policies. We trust you will see this application contains a strong operating schedule, taking everything into consideration and with robust policies in place. The applicant intends to show that it will continue to be a model premises, run in accordance with the Licensing Act 2003, and fully cooperating with all responsible authorities moving forward and being accepting of expert advice offered by any of the responsible authority. I fully understand the concerns of those who have objected. However, reading their concerns, there have been no submissions of evidence that are linked directly to the premises. But as a result of conversations today, we hope to allay their fears by adding additional conditions to the licence which are volunteered by the applicant. Namely, one, that between the hours of 0400 and 0600, no more than 2 persons will utilise the smoking area. That a contact number will be made available to local residents within the area to contact the premises if they have any issues over noise emanating from the premises between the hours of 4 and 6. And the third one, the premises licence holder will ensure that between the hours of 03:30 and 03:45, there will be no stockpiling of alcoholic drinks by customers. No more than 1 drink per person will be served, and customers will be informed that no alcohol sales will take place after 03:45.
Okay, thank you very much. That concludes your address. Councillor Jones, this question.
Regarding the litter, are you still happy to explicitly state the promotion
Yes, most definitely, councillor. Sorry, I've forgotten that.
Yeah, okay, David, has a,
Yes, Chair. The amendment to condition 44, I believe, will be adding on to the end, will be cleaned up on a regular basis, and particularly within the hours of 4 AM to 6 AM stop. Litter will include promotional literature. Chair, there was one thing to mention. Earlier, I wrote down the telephone contact to be in use during opening hours to contact the premises, whereas it's just been mentioned in respect only, I think, of noise from the premises between 4 AM to 6 AM. I'm happy to write down what I think is an amended condition, but I thought the premises license, sorry, the telephone contact number to the premises was for use by local residents if they had a concern during opening hours rather than particular opening hours.
I think yeah, I think during opening hours is probably better. So yes, I'm about that, Chair.
Leaving wording then, a telephone contact is to be made available for local residents to use to contact the premises during opening hours in case of any concern, in case of any noise concern.
I think the noise concern is probably better, otherwise it becomes a hotline for everything. Chair.
Thank you.
okay, thank you. Unless there are any more questions, not, we'll ask members of the public to leave now on determination. I would say to come back no earlier. Sorry.
councillor Graves, yeah.
Obviously, taken for the list, it's,
Leonie's taken over now. So I just need to, so when she'll let me know when to do the video.
I'm ready. You can turn the video on.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for waiting and welcome back to Norwich City Council's subcommittee for your goal on Prince of Wales Road application for variation of premises licence. Welcome back, Councillor Gray, if you'd like to take your previous seat. The committee has reached its determination and it's a unanimous decision to grant the licence as applied for and the conditions as volunteered by the applicants. The committee notes there were no objections from the responsible authorities and appropriate weight has been given to this, especially that there were none from the police and public protection. We also note the existing measures to control noise disturbance and new conditions offered today. And it is important to note also that the guidance states personal responsibility lies outside of the control of the licence holder once persons have left the premises. We also have the reference to the complaints regarding the noise were received but no specific complaints were received by public protection, which is important in this case. In respect of this particular premises, we have noted noise emissions and considers in balance there was insufficient evidence to suggest those noise issues arise directly from this premises, which is why we reached the decision reached. It's important for members of the public to remember that they have a mechanism to complain about specific premises, and I would encourage them to do so about any premises that are causing noise nuisance or in breach of any of the licensing objectives, and also they have an opportunity to call for a review of premises. I would encourage anyone to do so. Good reason to do so. The final point here is that there is a writing period within 21 days of receipt of the notification. Questions, comments, or anything else?
No, thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. So this meeting is closed. Thank you very much, everyone, for attending.